Oh, I didn't see you there. Hi, I'm Matt Ryan.
I said it must be.
Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about what I think are probably two of my favorite texts that we've read so far in Encounters. Hamlet and probably just the entirety of the Keatrians, but primarily Bright Star. Right, so what I found particularly interesting when comparing the two was that there are actually kind of quite a few similarities between John Keats and Hamlet himself. And I think that as a result, reading some of Keats' poetry and primarily Bright Star, as mentioned before, you can kind of get a better insight into the to be or not to be soliloquy. So then I think the best place to start, if you're going to be using Keats as kind of a lens or a looking glass through which to look at Hamlet's soliloquy, I think the best place to start is with John Keats, the poet himself. Well, to start with John Keats, I think you have to realize that he's really honestly kind of a sad character. At the young age of 14, his mother sadly died of tuberculosis, which I think was kind of a really hard thing for him, as it would be for any 14-year-old boy. He went on to study medicine in order to become a surgeon, even though that was not his desired profession of choice, instead desiring to be a poet. However, in his early 20s, I believe it was, he heard news that his brother was ailing, so he traveled home to take care of his brother, who it turned out also had tuberculosis. So as these things go, when he was 23, he unfortunately contracted tuberculosis. Being a doctor and having seen the fate of his mother and brother before him, Keats kind of knew that to contract tuberculosis at the time was pretty much a death sentence. So as a result, oftentimes Keats toyed with ideas of mortality and ephemerality, which can be often seen in his poetry. So I think all in all, Keats is really a pretty tragic figure. Hi, welcome back. So if we take a look at Keats' poem Bright Star, we see Keats reflect on a situation. He desires to be a successful poet, but he knows that he doesn't have much time. Furthermore, it is likely the poem was written about Isabella Jones, with whom he was involved, possibly sexually, at the time of the poem's writing. So, Keats uses an extended metaphor in the poem, describing himself as a star in the sky, which at the time was considered to be an object seemingly suspended in time. He describes as he looks down on the earth, as time passes, he is essentially unchanged. He longs for this sort of immortality, but about 3/4 of the way through a poem, he seems to realize that this kind of immortality leaves him unable to act, completely isolated from the rest of society. He then describes wishing that he could lay forever on his lover's breast, and perhaps realizing the implications of this at the end, he uses the line, "or else swoon to death," acknowledging that death is perhaps a necessary part of life and even that which motivates us to action. Hi, welcome back. So I think now if we turn to Hamlet, using this newfound insight that we've developed from reading Keats's Bright Star, we can really get a lot more out of Hamlet's to be or not to be soliloquy. So Hamlet's soliloquy begins in the first scene of Act 3. Okay, so he begins perhaps his most famous soliloquy with the lines, "to be or not to be." In this soliloquy, Hamlet entertains ideas of suicide, questioning the value of life. He also reflects on his inability to act throughout the first two acts of the play. He seems to determine that the only reason one would decide to not commit suicide, fail to act on one's inclinations to do so, in such a miserable world, is a fear of the unknown. The so-called dream of the sleep that is death is an enigma. It could potentially contain pains greater than those of the world in which we live now. So Hamlet argues that we choose the lesser of the two pains and live on. So I think that Keats' attitude towards death really draws our attention towards Hamlet's attitude towards death. In Bright Star, Keats seems to believe that death is a sort of catalyst, even though he seems to speak of death mournfully. He seems to believe that it is a necessary evil. It drives us to action. Interestingly, Hamlet seems to take the opposite view in the relationship between death and action. He seems to believe that the fear of death and the unknown strikes fear into us and prevents us from truly accomplishing what we set out to do. It is only in overcoming this fear and choosing to overcome death, which Hamlet seems to do in this scene, that we are able to accomplish what we set out to do. I think this soliloquy is incredibly powerful and a poignant moment in the play. It shows Hamlet shedding a lot of the fear and immaturities he showed in the first two acts of the play, setting a precedent for the rest of the play that he will follow. As we see, he begins to set into motion a brilliant and almost convoluted plan that is eventually realized in the final act of the play. But I believe that all starts right now in this soliloquy.